Let's start. Yo, Biggie, watch the gossip. Interviewing the best, finding out the tips and tricks. Yo, Biggie, let's start. Yo, Biggie, let's start.
Yo, Biggie on the mic. We talking truth, no hype. Drop that knife, drop that fork. It's time to light the torch. Listen up, we're in the studio, where the real talk flows, yo. The city's buzzing, the streets are loud, but we're talking calm, keep it proud. We got stories of struggle, stories of hope, from the block to the globe. We'll break it down, we'll break it clear. No fear, just sincere. Biggie, we're here to talk. We're not about drama, just a solid walk. Put down your knife, put down your fork. Let's talk about life, the truth, the word. We talk about money, we talk about pain, the pain of the youth, the loss of the main. We talk about love, about family ties, all the good and all the lies. We break the chains of ignorance, show the truth with our own language. We're building a bridge over the storm. Keep it steady, keep it warm. Biggie, we're here to talk. We're not about drama, just a solid walk. Put down your knife, put down your fork. Let's talk about life, the truth, the word. Biggie, we're here to talk. We're not about drama, just a solid walk. Put down.
Yo, Biggie, let's start. Yo, Biggie, watch the gossip. Interviewing the best, finding out the tips and tricks. Yo, Biggie, let's start. Yo, Biggie, let's start. Yo, Biggie, watch the gossip. Interviewing the best, finding out the tips and tricks. Yo, Biggie, let's start.
Yeah. Biggie on the mic. We're talking truth, no hype. Drop everything and hear what's up. It's Biggie time, so let's light things up. Listen up, Biggie in the studio, where the real talk flows, yo. The vibe is buzzing, the truth is loud, but Biggie talking calm, keeping it proud. We got stories of struggle, from hardship to hope, from the block to the globe. Yo, Biggie, break it down, break it clear. No filter, no lies, just sincere. Follow Biggie, big. Hit like and let's talk. We're not about drama, just about the life we walk. Drop everything and hear what's up. It's Biggie time, so let's light things up. So let's light things up. So let's light things up. We talk about money, we talk about pain, the pain of the youth, the loss of the main. Biggie talk about love, about family ties, all the good and all the lies. We break the chains of ignorance, show the truth with our own language. We're building a bridge over the storm. Keep it steady, keep it warm. Follow Biggie, big. Hit like and let's talk. We're not about drama, just about the life we walk. Drop everything and hear what's up. It's Biggie time, so let's light things up. So let's light things up. From the suburbs to the skyline, from the sunrise to the shine. We're turning the page, we'll break the walls, we'll break the cage. Biggie on mic with heat to your ear. What's happening in the world? No fear. We talk about peace, we talk about love, we talk about hope. Like a dove, we keep the rhythm, keep the rhyme. We'll light the way through the night. Follow Biggie, hit like and let's talk. We're not about drama, just about the life we walk. Drop everything and get a teacup. It's Biggie time, so let's light things up. So let's light things up. So let's light things up. Yeah. Biggie on the mic. We're talking truth, no hype. Drop everything and hear what's up. It's Biggie time, so let's light things up. Listen up, Biggie in the studio, where the real talk flows, yo. The vibe is buzzing, the truth is loud, but Biggie talking calm, keeping it proud. We got stories of struggle, from hardship to hope, from the block to the globe. Yo, Biggie, break it down, break it clear. No filter, no lies, just sincere. Follow Biggie, Big. Hit like and let's talk. We're not about drama, just about the life we walk. Drop everything and hear what's up. It's Biggie time, so let's light things up. So let's light things up. So let's light things up. We talk about money, we talk about pain, the pain of the youth, the loss of the main. Biggie talk about love, about family ties, all the good and all the lies. We break the chains of ignorance, show the truth with our own language. We're building a bridge over the storm. Keep it steady, keep it warm. Follow Biggie, Big. Hit like and let's talk. We're not about drama, just about the life we walk. Drop everything and hear what's up. It's Biggie time, so let's light things up. So let's light things up. From the suburbs to the skyline, from the sunrise to the shine. We're turning the page, we'll break the walls, we'll break the cage. Big it on mic with heat to your ear. What's happening in the world? No fear. We talk about peace, we talk about love, we talk about hope like a dove. We
Yo, Biggie, let's start. Yo, Biggie, watch the gossip, interviewing the best, finding out the tips and tricks. Yo, Biggie, let's talk. Yo, Biggie, let's talk. Yo, Biggie, watch the gossip, interviewing the best, finding out the tips and tricks. Yo, Biggie, let's talk. Yo, Biggie, let's talk.
Good evening. Let me stop this music first. Good evening. Welcome back to episode number 71. And today I'm joined by a gentleman called Danny Cohen, whose father experienced a real life awakening. So I want to get into this because I'm a bit skeptical and confused, even though I'm quite a spiritual person and I completely believe what happened. But I want to hear it from Danny. So basically, his father had dementia, and he had two. Oh, what's happened there? Hold on, 1 second. Where have I gone? So his father had dementia, and then he had 2 days of clarity, and in those 2 days he sent various messages. So I'm going to find out from Dan. Good evening, Dan. Well, good afternoon in your time. How are you?
Biggie, it's such a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you very much, sir. How are you?
Good. By the way, I love your music.
You like it? Were you jamming, yeah?
I was jamming. You know what? You could do my theme music.
I'll do it for you, my man. No problem. How about you anyway? You good?
I'm good. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon here in New York. So
Okay.
I'm great, and I've been looking forward to this.
Thank you. Me too.
Nice.
So before we move any further, tell me a bit about yourself, because you're a podcaster as well, ain't you? Give yourself a plug.
Well, yeah, I am a podcaster and an author. I actually started my life as an attorney for the first 4.5 years. I hated being a lawyer. I became an entrepreneur. I went into my own business. But really, my latest passion in life is after we had the experience with my father, I wrote a book called Awakenings in Real Life.
Yep.
Then I followed that up with my own podcast, telling other people's awakening stories. And you can understand that more when you understand what happened in my book and how it led to the podcast.
So did you find that after your experience, you found other people that have had a similar experience?
Well, not a similar experience. So my father had a 2-day awakening from his dementia. And we're going to go into all of that. But afterwards, after I first wrote an article about it and then a book about it, but I was watching a guy on TV that had a bad spinal condition. He decided to give up his corporate life and to learn to sail and sail across the Pacific Ocean. And I said to myself, wow, this guy had his own awakening. He changed his whole, we think of awakening as something spiritual or religious, but an awakening is really an awareness, recognition, or realization of something. So my father,
I thought it was, because I'm quite a spiritual guy, I thought it was a spiritual thing.
well, you could describe it, what my father went through, as a spiritual thing, and I can go into the options there, but I tell stories, I call it inspiring stories of Are you there? I think I lost you again.
I'm still here, mate. Go on, Dan, carry on speaking, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there I am.
It's inspiring stories of transformation, meaning, and hope. So I got a guy who had a near-death experience. He broke his neck while skydiving. I got someone who lost a child and then had an awakening to give his mission to carry on. I got someone who was bullied their whole life and then later in life had an awakening to become a clown, a humanitarian clown.
Okay.
I've had some tremendous stories that I tell. A guy who had a son who had autism, and his awakening moment is when he connected with his son. People that have gone through trauma and changed your life. Some really great stories and possible guests for you too. So,
fantastic. You have to hook me up with people, definitely. Okay, what was life like before you had this awakening with your father?
that's a great question. So my father was a very big presence in my life. He was a guy that my brother likes. I have a brother and a sister. He exuded love. He was demonstratively loving, especially to his wife and his 3 children. For me, he was my go-to guy. He was my problem solver. He was my confidant. He was a big social presence. He was my hero. In fact, I write a chapter in the book. I'm not going to show it every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
My last chapter is called Who Is Your One? I believe everybody in life has that one person that they look up to.
Go-to person, yeah.
Someone who loves you unconditionally. Not necessarily a hero, but it's someone who always wants you to do better than them. And my father was that guy for me. So I think there's no statute of limitations on someone who having their one. You know, you can be
100%.
You know, it doesn't matter how old you are. I still listen, I wish my father was around today. I could still use that presence. You know, do you have that person in your life?
100%. Mostly my mother.
Your mother. Yeah. So it could be a parent. Sometimes it could be a friend.
A go-to friend, yep.
Yeah, a spouse. But, Tom Brady, the American football player, was once asked by a young man, "You're a lot of people's heroes. Who's your hero?" And he said, "My dad." And it brought him to tears. So,
and everybody must be looked at for what a weirdo.
Exactly. So he was that kind of important person for me. I went through a divorce. He was one of my main sources of support when I was in business. He was a businessman too. I really emulated him. I would ask him business questions. So he was that kind of presence.
Okay, Dan, take us back to that day in 2015 when what emotions went through you and your dad on that day.
So I'm going to back it up a little bit if I can to tell you how we
Sure.
got there. So in 2005, my father turned 75. We had a surprise party for him. And everybody from my mother down to the youngest grandchild all got to make a speech on how they felt about my father. And he got to hear those words. But
So
five,
obviously he wasn't just special to you; he was special to everybody in the whole family.
well, you hit the nose on the head because I also got a chapter in the book. I call it Perspectives, right?
Excellent.
I felt there's nobody on this planet that has the kind of relationship I have with my father. You know, he's my guy, I'm his guy. And then when I heard, especially my siblings talking to my father, my brother and I are very different, but he said he and my father are a lot alike. And I
Yeah.
said, that's interesting because I'm so alike my father. And my sister said, all my friends love my dad. He's just a warm guy. But can you imagine being his baby girl? I mean, she was not a baby then. And she spoke a song to him. So they each felt the same way. So I think in life that if you can appreciate other people's perspectives, you'll have empathy and we'd get a lot along better in this world. We all look through
100%.
everything through our own lens, but if you could see other people's perspectives. So 5 months after that party, he had a stroke. So my brother's a physician. He was walking into my brother's office and they knew right away with the symptoms of a stroke. One side of his face was
Yeah.
drooping. He couldn't smile. They knew he was having a stroke. He was bleeding into his brain. And within 10 minutes, they got him into the hospital. They stopped the bleeding and he recovered pretty nicely. For the first couple of years, he was able to drive. He was able to use his cell phone. But the stroke caused dementia. And dementia is a decline of cognitive function. And it runs in stages. So it runs where you're pretty good and maybe having lapses in 7 different stages. So by the time we got to 2015, he was in the last stage. But if
So
I
when people
can,
think of dementia, sorry, Dan, when people think of dementia, they just think they don't remember things. Is that right?
you
Or
know, people don't really know what dementia is. A lot of people have heard Alzheimer's. Okay, we've
yeah,
all heard Alzheimer's. And a lot of people think Alzheimer's and dementia is different. They're not. See, dementia is the symptoms. When you have Alzheimer's, which is plaque in the brain, it
yeah,
causes dementia. You could get dementia from certain diseases. You could get dementia from like what my father got from like a blow to the head.
yeah.
You can get dementia from vascular dementia, which they used to call senility, a hardening of the arteries. So dementia is the symptoms, whether it's Alzheimer's or a stroke, and it's a cognitive decline. So it usually starts with loss of memory. That's the biggest thing. You start to lose your short-term memory. A lot of times these people have you could ask them what happened 50 years ago, they'll remember, but 5 minutes ago, they don't remember. They'll repeat.
Can it be the other way around as well, where they remember things short term, but they don't remember long term?
No, not with dementia. It always affects the short-term memory, not the long-term memory.
Okay.
That's just, yeah, I haven't heard of a case the other way. That's why sometimes, like I had a friend whose mother had dementia. And when he saw her, she used to think he was his father because,
Really?
yeah, he looked like his father. They really looked alike. But when the father passed away, she thought he was the father because that was her long-term memory, but
Wow.
no short-term memory. You repeat things a lot. You might ask the same questions a lot. A lot of times as it progresses, the worst case scenario is they don't remember who you are. My father, even towards the end, still knew how we were most of the time. So that was a good thing. But some people, they don't remember who you are, which is probably the toughest thing you could
Definitely.
go through. It also affects people physically. So at a certain point, my father became incontinent. He was wearing Depends. He needed help eating. He really lost his ability to speak. Only a word or two. He wouldn't initiate a conversation. Maybe you'd get a word or two out of him. A lot of times what happened, these people, towards the end of the day, they go through what they call sundowning. It's an experience at the end of the day where they can become more aggressive and agitated. My father was pretty amicable most of the time, where a lot of times people that get dementia, they get mean or mean-spirited. So when you're a family member, you don't recognize that person.
Yeah.
You know? My father didn't really get mean-spirited, but what happened is when he was being bathed or shaved, he'd cry out and like he was in tremendous pain. And when you're a child and you hear your parents screaming out like they're in pain,
Not nice, is it?
even though they're not in pain, it's hard to hear. So it progresses. It progresses over stages. Now, what I tell people is, for me, I didn't get caught up whether he was in stage 3 or stage 4 or stage 7. I knew what was going on. No one had to tell me where he was. I figured to get that kind of level of detail would just cause me more angst. Some people might want to know, but if I, speak to people, I said, it doesn't matter. You know where your person's at. So that's what happened. He progressed. It's almost like you're watching a person fade, and it's almost like mourning someone who's living. It's a very difficult thing, especially when there's such a big presence in your life. So let me tell you what happened in 2015, which is really amazing. So in the summer of 2015, he was hospitalized twice with pneumonia. The second time, pneumonia, he was also hypertensive. So they loaded him up with steroids and antibiotics. Okay. And he was in a New York hospital, and I lived about 2 hours away in New Jersey. I came to visit him. Remember, he's in the last stages now. I walk in the room and he says, "Hi, Danny." And I said, "Hi, Dad." He says, "I love you very much." I said, "I love you very much." He says, "What happened to me?" I said, "Well, you have pneumonia, you're being treated, and hopefully you'll go home soon." Then all of a sudden, Biggie, I realized, wow, this is not the guy I saw a few days earlier that was not speaking and not cognizant of what's going on. I was having a conversation like I had with him my whole life.
Every day, yeah.
Only this point, he was in the depths of dementia. And I said to myself, when he said to me, "What happened to me?" maybe he wasn't saying, "What happened to me now?" but "Where have I been these past 10 years? So lying in this bed was the man that I remembered growing up. My brother, whose office, one of his partners took care of him, and he was in the hospital a lot, I describe it as being 90% himself. My brother says the bar was so low that he came back and he was answering questions.
Wow.
And having full conversations.
So from going from kind of like, was he in a cabbage state, would you say? He was on the way out.
Yeah, he was on the way out. He was in the last stages of dementia. There's something that people go through. They call it terminal lucidity.
Yeah.
Right before people die, sometimes they have some clarity. This wasn't that, because this was 8 months prior to him passing. And this wasn't just, you hear situations where people will have a moment of clarity, where they'll say, "Hi, Dan," or "Hi, son," and then fade back in. He had literally 48 hours where he was himself. And what we experienced in those 2 days is remarkable. And I'd love to share with you.
Go for it. Okay. When did you, before you get into that, when did you think you're going to turn this into a personal experience or into a memoir?
Okay. So what happened is, after he had the awakening experience, and when you hear what we went through, I wanted to share that message. And I wrote an article on a site called medium.com, and I shared the article. because in those 2 days, I think he gave a message of hope, and not only to the family, but to other people, family members and caregivers going through it. But it wasn't until 10 years later when I finished, I'm an entrepreneur, my last consulting gig, that I said, you know what, I'd like to share this in a book for a lot of people to write. But that story would only fill one chapter. So I filled it with other family stories that I call mini awakenings. But to really understand, you gotta understand what happened during those 2 days. Really remarkable.
Go on and take me through it.
Okay. So the first thing is, at one point, my father says to my brother, I'm happy to have a son like you.
To your brother?
What's that?
To yourself or to your brother?
To my brother.
Okay.
I'm happy to have a son like you. Now, I described to you that my brother felt the same way about my father as I did. So to see this man, so he was a doctor, you know, so he became like, he picked up the mantle of the problem solver in the family, especially if there was a medical issue.
Yeah.
But he also got involved in other things in the family too. But what he always had, my father was always that go-to guy for him. Still, as much of a competent, bright, loving man he was, my father always had his back too.
Yeah.
So he said when my father said that to him, it was one of the most remarkable and wonderful things to experience, because he hadn't seen that.
Definitely. And it was all clarity as well.
All clarity. I'm happy to have a son like you. Then listen to this. We started to fill him in on what the grandchildren were doing. And my father would say, wow, that's great. That's marvelous. That's terrific. But at one point he says, isn't one of the grandkids just started medical school? And didn't one of them start an Ivy League school? And we said, yeah, you're right. And here's the interesting thing. Those events happened not before he was in dementia, right when he was in the middle and the throes of dementia.
Wow.
So the question is, how did he know? You see, people think because people have dementia and they don't speak clearly, they don't remember things, they may repeat things, then maybe they don't know what's going on. But he showed us that even in the throes of dementia, he was much more aware of what was going on. And I think that's so important, because I was in a support group once for people, and someone wrote, isn't it wonderful that a person with dementia or Alzheimer's, they're like in their own world and nobody bothers them? And I said, you know, I can understand that thinking. But if you think they're in their own world, you know, you're going to treat them and not bother with them.
True.
If you include them in life, right, and you think, and they're aware, and they're more aware of what's going on, then they're going to be part of life. And when he said to, he also knew what hospital he was in, and nobody told him. So I think a person that has Alzheimer's or dementia is much more aware of what's going on than people think.
It's a bit like, you know, when someone's in a coma, they look like, apparently, so they say medically, they say they remember, they can hear everything and they remember everything. Is that right?
You're exactly right. You people are told, talk to the person in the coma because they understand.
They understand and they're listening.
I think that's a great analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's not, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be necessarily people that are going through dementia or Alzheimer's. I think it could be other mental conditions or even physical conditions. I think you cannot underestimate the human spirit and the human soul. And, you know, he was much more aware of what was going on. So that was remarkable. He also reminisced about, my father was a boxer in the Army. He was 26-0, right? And
wow, okay.
Yeah, he said, and he was smaller for his weight class. He goes, I used to underestimate my opponents. So in the U.S., we have a football player, not a soccer player like you guys, that was smaller and undersized. It was his favorite player, and he came out of nowhere to have a great career. And my father at one point bought all the grandchildren his jersey number, and he took a family picture with it. He goes, "Oh, I remember taking a picture with all the grandchildren in the jersey." And I was a boxer like this guy was a football player. I was underestimated. And he says, "What's he doing now?" And I Googled him. So it was remarkable that he remembered that. He
Wow.
reminisced.
Okay.
Yeah. He loved Muhammad Ali. He reminisced about Muhammad Ali and his career. He told my mother, who they were married 62 years at the time, that she was the love of his life. Imagine hearing that, and you didn't hear that for like 10 years.
Amazing.
So here's something real interesting. So he had a couple of quirks. So maybe this is old school. So when he used to take a nap in the middle of the day, he'd put a long brown or black sock over his eyes to block out any
It's not
light.
the sunlight.
Right. So he's lying in the hospital bed, and my mother's sitting there, and he says, "Arl," her name was Arlene, "do you have my sock so I could take a nap?" It's something he hadn't done 10 years earlier. And my father, like in life, he was a good tipper. If you took care of him, that's how he showed his appreciation. He tipped people. It didn't matter his lot in life, whether didn't matter where he was always a generous tipper. He's lying in the hospital. He says to my mother, "Do you have any cash?" He wanted to tip the nurses and the aides. That was so wonderful for him. I mean, it was so typical my father. It really was. But probably the most profound thing that happened and really led me to share the story was I wanted to bring my kids there so they could see Grandpa as they remembered him. I mean, they were relatively young when he had the dementia, but I wanted them. So I couldn't get them in time because at the end of the second day, he already had reverted back to his full-blown dementia. But my brother videotaped some of him. So when my daughter got there, we showed her one video in particular. So my brother asked him, "What are you happy about now, Dad?" And he said, "I'm happy just to be here and alive. I'm happy to be here and alive." And Biggie, I thought that was very profound. I think he was telling us and the family that I still appreciate life. I still want to live, even in the course of dementia. I still have a desire to live. And
Okay,
that?
was it difficult revisiting these moments when you were writing the book?
That's a great question. It really was not a difficult moment for me. It might have been for other people, but for me, reliving those moments brought me a kind of joy. And I think when he was telling us he wanted to live and appreciate life, he was sending a message to us that he's still fighting. And when I shared the story, first in an article and then in a book, so many people said to me, it gives me hope that my loved one still wants to live and still appreciates life. So it was not difficult for me to relive. In fact, when I was reflecting on that incident, and I said, that's not enough to write a book. I wrote a book with a number of chapters, and I include what they call reflection pages.
Okay.
So I write other family stories. And I said, why do people want to hear my stories? And I said, you know what? Because when I reflected back, some of my family stories, there were lessons to be learned, like mini awakenings. And when I shared those stories, I wanted to bring the reader into the book and have them reflect back into their own life. So I tell other stories. I share stories of small acts of kindness. I share stories of the importance of showing up. And that was about an uncle of mine who was always showing up. And I wanted the reader to relate it to their own life. So that's what I did.
Excellent. Okay, you just touched on it briefly, but what do you hope readers can take away from Awakening in Real Life?
So I want readers to take away that if they're dealing with someone, whether it's dementia, Alzheimer's, another mental condition, or even a physical illness like cancer or a physical
Yeah,
disability, that your loved one is still appreciate life and want to live. Okay. And the two things that I learned in the course of dementia are two things. One was acceptance and one was inclusion. So, in terms of acceptance, because dementia ran in stages, it's very easy to get frustrated when someone repeats things over and over, or they were better 6 months ago. You got to accept them wherever they're at, because if not, it's not good for them, and you're going to get frustrated too. And you got to give yourself some grace that you're not going to be perfect other times. The other thing is inclusion, because like I said, I think they're more aware of what's going on. Include them in life. So
definitely.
I always took my father to a movie every week and out to lunch with my mother. And when we couldn't do that, I would watch TV with him and eat with him. And it was so important for me to include him in life. And there's a great story in the book if you wanted to hear it about one time we went to the track where he was at the ends of dementia. But that's up to you.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us.
So I'll tell you, my father liked to take me to the track when I
As
was
in car track or dogs?
not dogs, horses.
Oh, horses. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but not the thoroughbreds, the jockeys, the kind where they're. I think they have them in the UK where they're on a cart and they're leading a horse. Anyway,
yeah.
we went a lot as a kid. So, and then I started to take my kids. I'll tell you a quick funny story first. So before my son started first grade, we went to the track. My father and I and my son, my daughter was too little. My father had a very big day, right? Says to my son, let's go to the toy store. You can buy whatever you want. So he bought a big Lego, right? Like $100, 100-pound Lego. Comes to school the first day, the teacher says to the students, what would you do if you had $100? My son says, I'd go to Freehold Raceway.
Yeah. Excellent.
So the next week, I tell him the story. My father laughs. He says, let's go back. He doesn't win a race. And I wink at him. I said, I'm sorry you didn't win. He goes, no. He tells my son, when you go to the track, expect to lose. Flash forward 10 years later, we're at the party. My son says to his grandpa, Grandpa, I know you like to go to the casino and play poker. I want you to know one thing, expect to lose. So he gave it right back to him.
Excellent.
So 2015, right? He's in the late stages of dementia. Out of nowhere, he says, let's go to the horse track. I knew he'd forget 3 minutes later. It would be a big trip for me. My mother wasn't really driving. I'd have to go 2 hours to get him, 2 hours back. But I said, you know what? He asked, I'm going to include him. We go to the horse track, okay? He used to be a pretty good handicapper. There was usually one race he felt confident in. Out of 10 times, we probably won 6 times. I had another way of knowing whether his dementia. He, over the years, would circle less and less things on the race form.
Okay.
But when we got there, he couldn't read the race form. He couldn't really read the odds. We said, Dad, pick a horse in race number 1. He picked number 7, right? My mother, she reads, she goes, number 7, that's the longest horse in the race. That's 40-1. He doesn't know what he's doing. My son says, Grandma, when Grandpa picks a horse, that horse is usually going to win. And I said, Mom, when he picks clearly tongue in cheek. So I put a few more bucks on the race. The race goes off. Our horse is in last place. Comes down the stretch. This horse comes out of nowhere, wins by a nose.
Wow.
The longest horse in the race. No emotion from my father. But my son says, Grandpa, you picked the longest horse in the race. He came from nowhere and won by a nose. The biggest smile came to his face. it made the whole day worthwhile. My
So
son,
is this when your father was in hospital at his late stages?
yeah, I mean, this was right
Wow.
before hospital, but he was. And my son told that story at his funeral, that including him that day, and his when his face lit up when that horse won, it was a memory we never forget. So my advice to people is, no matter what someone's going through, appreciate where they're at and include them in life. I think that's that for whatever kind of mental or physical condition they have.
Definitely. Okay, before all this happened with your father, what was your understanding of dementia?
I didn't have a tremendous understanding dementia. I really didn't. Like most people, I thought Alzheimer's. I
Yeah,
just knew it was people, didn't seem to be there as much and they weren't as sharp as much. But because I became, my father had it, although my mother was the primary caregiver, I got to witness it in action, you know? And what I learned and what I also share in the book is I think there's maybe because Alzheimer's and dementia is there's less stigma about it, but so many mental conditions and physical conditions, there's a stigma attached to it.
yeah,
Instead of saying a person has a condition, they become the condition. So I
yeah,
think it's so important for people to treat people with dignity. People are going through something. That doesn't mean what they are. We could separate, this is something going on in his brain. It wasn't my father. He suffered from OCD his life too. That was a part of his brain not working, but not the man he was. I'd love to get away from the stigma associated with certain, mental illnesses and physical illnesses.
Okay, what would you like family that are currently going through dementia? What would you like them to know, or what message do you want to send them, and what can they hold on to?
So again, the most important thing is to accept what the person is going through. Try not to get frustrated with them. It's hard not to when someone's repeating themselves 20 times or they forget things. So try to accept them where they're at, knowing it's going to get progressively worse, but to give yourself some grace too. You're not going to be perfect, and that includes in life. And I learned is very end, all he would do is hold my hand and kiss it. And that was enough for me. The essence who he was there. And remember that your person isn't gone. I think they're more aware of going on, but the essence
Yeah.
of who they are is still there. And I think that's important to hold on to. I really do.
Okay, did the experience change your relationship or dealing with the grief?
Well, change my relationship with my father or just handling grief in
Just,
general.
just, just handling grief.
Yeah, you know, it did because, I lost people, but this was like grieving someone while they're living,
Yeah,
and watching them fade away. It's a very difficult thing. But despite that, we wanted to hold on to him for as long as we could. A doctor said to me once, and my brother went to great lengths to keep my father alive. He would check his blood. If he was dehydrated, he would get fluids. And this doctor says to me, "What are you guys doing? This is not your father. This is not the guy we loved." And I said, but he still is our father. He's
yeah,
still
of
the
course.
so, so it changed that aspect of life. But, when you lose a parent, it was a profound, I since lost my mother too. It's such a profound loss in life that it's okay to grieve. There's nothing wrong in showing emotion. I don't believe in the baloney that a man can't show emotion. I grieved openly, and I think it's important to remember. And for me, I always feel my father's presence with me. I don't necessarily need to see a particular sign. So, it didn't make it any easier because we saw this, fade away over 10 times. Sometimes you hear people say, oh, I wish the person fell asleep and passed away in their sleep. I'm not sure there's a better alternative, but it's hard to lose that person that's so influential in your life.
100%. Okay. Was there anything your father said during the last days that stayed with you the most? And do you believe the moment of clarity is more common when we realize?
So again, the moment that stayed with me the most was when he said, "I still appreciate life and wanna live." I thought that was very profound.
Definitely.
So here's what I think, okay? I think people have moments of clarity. I have not heard of another circumstance where someone had a 2-day awakening. So we try to figure out why it happened, right? So my brother, the doctor, tried to come up with a medical explanation, right? First, he thought it was the steroids, which reduces inflammation, reduced inflammation in his brain, and suddenly got better. But I didn't buy that. This is a downward trend. How could that happen? He's since researched it again and heard that steroids can't help but can hurt a dementia patient. And he thought it had something to do with dopamine levels and neurotransmitters. I don't necessarily buy it.
He's obviously looking at the medical side, isn't he?
You said you're a spiritual guy, right?
Yeah.
So I said to myself, is it a miracle? And I'm not very religious. I'm more spiritual too. But I think I like that explanation. I think it certainly could be a miracle. The third thing was my father was a fighter his whole life. Was he sending us a message that he was still fighting to live? But I'll tell you, and I put all those things in the book, but I did a little book signing, and a friend of me came over to me and says, "You know why your father went through what he did?" He said, "So he could share the experience with you. You could write a book and share it with the world and maybe give support to other people." I like that explanation the best.
100%. Definitely.
I really
Okay.
do.
What needs to change in healthcare to all society when it comes to dementia care, do you think, in your opinion?
Well, I think a lot needs to change in healthcare in general. In dementia care, there's still such a lot unknown. I think my advice to caregivers and family members is don't be so reliant on the doctor. You know your person best. You got to be your best advocate for your person. A doctor will know from a clinical point of view. He can maybe rate the stages. He can make some suggestions. And I think this goes in all health areas.
True.
Don't be afraid to push back. You know what's going on either with yourself or your person. Don't buy blindly what doctors say. I mean, there are tremendous resources. When you're living with someone every day or you're close to them, you know best. And so I would like, that's number one. And number two is treat your person with dignity. Don't treat them as they're in their own world. Treat them with dignity. They're going through something, but I think they're more aware. Treat them with dignity. Treat them a part of life. Include them what you're doing. If you got a family occasion, don't leave them at home. Bring them along, even though it might be difficult.
100%.
That's my message. And I think, just as a side note, I think healthcare is going in the wrong direction because
Definitely.
now I don't know about in the UK, but now doctors don't see sick patients. It's only
Over
urgent
the phone or
care.
online.
Right, online.
It's the same
urgent
here as
care.
well.
And in the US, the doctors are not even seeing their patients in hospitals. There's a special hospital doctor. It's getting away from more personal contact, more to a revenue based, and it's a difficult thing. I mean, it's a issue. Maybe it's better in the UK with
Definitely. Nah, it's the same. Trust me. You can't even get a doctor's appointment here.
yeah.
Okay, Dan,
Yes.
if you could speak to your father today, what would you say to him?
I would first say I'd love you very much. And I'll tell you what he would say to me.
Go on.
Okay. And you know what? I think I wrote the book for my dad. I really do. It's like my love letter to him. Some of the reviews I got, even more than talking about the awakening story, they were talking about the relationship between me and my father. I think of all the people in my world, he would be the most excited for this journey. He was my biggest fan. You know, he would say, "What's going on with the podcast? How many books did you sell?" He'd tell me he's very proud of me, you know. And I think I wrote it to keep his legacy going way beyond me. But it's showing my love for him. And I'd say I love you, Dad, and you were, you know, such an important part of my life.
100%. Okay. Another question: when you mentioned all this in your podcast and in your book, did a lot of people think you're cuckoo?
Yeah, you know what? That's a great question, but I have not gotten that response. Oddly enough, nobody has said, you know, nobody's asked me that question. Are you crazy? Did you make the whole thing up? No, nobody's, because I think people have, even if they're going through it where someone will have moments of clarity. I hear people's stories say, well, they all of a sudden they remembered me and they didn't remember me. So I never got the response of, oh, you're full of baloney. Maybe because I had a doctor involved. I never got that reaction. So maybe I think people like to hear stories of awakening or stories that may seem miraculous, but, you know, we videotaped it. So
Oh, brilliant. Even
it
better.
happened that his neurologist treated
Yeah.
dementia patients, said, I never saw this in my 30 years of practice.
Wow.
My brother asked all his colleagues because he's looking for a medical explanation. Nope, we've never seen anything like it. Why my dad? I don't know, but maybe to share this message that people going through these kind of things still want to live. I think it's the greatest thing he's given, and the message he's given.
Definitely a special man.
Yeah, you know what? You maybe, yeah. Maybe.
What's your dad's name? I did have it down here somewhere.
Herbie. His name was
Herbie. That's it, Herbie.
Herbie. Yeah, and it's so interesting. Everybody called him Herbie. Even the grandkids, before they called him Grandpa, they were calling him Herbie. It was almost like a familiar thing. And he, you know, he had that kind of personality where people warmed up to him. You know, he seemed to like solve any problem in my life. I'll tell you just a quick story about my father and my brother.
Go for it.
My father grew up in Brooklyn, New York, much tougher than my generation, with 3 older brothers, right? So he, you know, he held his own. So he was a fighter, and he would fight, and he protected his friends in life. And we didn't grow up as fighters like he did. My father never went to college. My father was a street guy who made a successful business career. But my brother's 16 years old. We lived in an apartment building, 23 floors high, 3 different independent sections. So my brother's coming home from his first date out of the neighborhood. He comes home and he gets jumped by 2 guys, okay? He never had a fight in his life. One guy puts a knife to his throat. My brother somehow escapes, starts running away. These guys are following him. He runs into our apartment building. We lived in the A section. He goes up the C section all the way to the roof on the 23rd floor, runs across, comes down, gets to our apartment. These young men are following, comes into the apartment and says to my father, I was just jumped. The guy put a knife to and my brother tells this story great, a knife to my throat. So my father was a great problem solver. And the way my brother tells the story, my father sat down and says, don't worry about it. I'll call the parents tomorrow. We'll work it out. Nope. That's not what my father did. My father says, you have to go downstairs. You got to find these guys and you got to fight them right now. You can't be afraid. So my brother went from being terrified, right, to being empowered. Like all of a sudden, my father, he's right. I can't be afraid. He goes downstairs. The guys are separated, finds the guy who put a knife to his throat, right? And my brother starts beating the crap out of the guy, okay, one-on-one. Then as this fight's going on, all of a sudden, the local bully of the neighborhood, who's a few years older, he's like 19, comes in. He's a karate guy, and he's friends with this other guy. And he goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. and he makes like a karate stance, right? Like he's going to get in and help his friend fight my brother. So you know what happens? All of a sudden, out of the shadows, my father pops in, right? He forms a boxing stance.
Excellent.
And he says to the karate kid, I'm not going to kick your butt. You're going to go upstairs, get your father,
Get
bring
your
him
dad.
upstairs, and I'm going to kick his ass.
Brilliant.
So, you know, he was the guy who always came out of the shadows to be there for his family. That's
Fantastic.
the type of guy he was.
Dan, you've been absolutely fantastic, and I wish you all the best. But before you go, have you got a nomination for me? Somebody that would benefit from coming on here and talking?
Yes, I would. But can I tell you where people can get my book? Can I do that
Of course
first?
you can, my friend. Go for it.
All right, just while so the book is called Awakenings in Real Life. My Dad's Awakening from Dementia Woke Me Up Too. So you can find it on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com too. You could also go to my website, Awakenings in Real Life, and there's a link to where you can get the book. I told you a little bit my podcast where I tell other people's awakening stories. That's also on YouTube and Apple, Spotify, and other sites. If you go to my website, Awakenings in Real Life, there's links there too. If people have an awakening story or you get my book and you want to reflect on things, email me at info@awakeningsinreallife. I love to speak to people and share stories. I'm also on the social media at Awakenings in Real Life. But yeah, you know what? I've interviewed a lot of interesting people. But I got a guy for you that I think was great. His name is Bullseye the Clown. He comes on in full clown makeup. Okay.
Excellent.
Here's his story. When he was a young man, he was terribly bullied. Okay. Bullied as a young man. And he talks about when he went through and how he learned to deal with bullies. And he's written a couple of books. And, you know, when you're bullied, you try to be as invincible as possible. When he turned 46 years old, he decides that he's going to become a clown.
46.
46. He sees Patch Adams as a famous clown. There was a movie with Robin Williams. And he sees that this Patch Adams going to Russia on a humanitarian mission is looking for clowns. He says, you know what? I'll try to be a clown. And he became a clown, and he goes on these missions around the world, helping poor people and bringing them food and making them laugh. And he went from being bullied to Bullseye the Clown, from being invisible to as visible as possible. I think he would be a great guest for you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I got other people that have gone through transformations. I will certainly give you the information.
Yeah, definitely. Send me the information or email it to me, or I'll touch base with him 100%.
I will.
But Dan, thank you very much. Your story's been absolutely amazing. Thank you.
You're terrific. I thank you so much for your great questions, for having me on. I really appreciate it. Listen, keep doing what you're doing because you're sharing tremendous stories. I know how hard it is. You know, it's not easy to do a podcast. You get the ability to share your story with the world. You're bringing my story, I think, to areas that maybe people won't normally hear my story. And I thank you very much, and I applaud you for what you're doing.
You're most welcome, Dan. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. And you take care and keep smiling, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Biggie.